Hi everyone, this is Cecil again, and on today's Yellowstone podcast, I'm going to be talking about a short stretch of road, but a really interesting one that runs between the north entrance of Yellowstone at the small town of Gardiner and Mammoth Hot Springs. Now, even though this is a short stretch of road, there's some really interesting points along the stretch of road, including the area that is halfway between the equator and the North Pole, a place where you can often see bighorn sheep, another area where you're actually allowed most of the time to hop into the remnants of a hot spring, as well as a herd of elk that is almost always to be seen in a certain place. Those of you who have watched or seen my Yellowstone podcasts and virtual Yellowstone tours before will know that the roads through Yellowstone make up a massive figure of eight. And today we're going to be looking right at the very top of that figure of eight. And talking about looking, guys, if you're listening to this as a podcast rather than viewing and listening it on YouTube, please consider going to YouTube, searching for Yellowstone Tours, which is our channel. Once it comes up, click on it, and you'll see that not only do we have more Yellowstone videos and virtual Yellowstone tours and podcasts than anyone in the world, but if you search for this particular podcast, you'll be able to find it and then watch along, because I will be using a couple of maps. One of them is the map which you can see at our motel site, ysmotel.com/map. That's ysmotel.com/map. The other one is a map which you can find pretty easily at Google Maps. So if we go back to the map at our site, ysmotel.com/map, you'll see once again that we're at the very top of Yellowstone. We're at the small town of Gardiner, and we're going to head in a southerly direction towards Mammoth Hot Springs. And I'd like to show you a couple of things before we leave Gardiner. I've mentioned to you before that there's not that many places in Yellowstone where you're allowed to mountain bike, but if you have a look here just to the south of Gardiner, you'll see what's known as the Old Yellowstone Trail. And you may like to consider doing a section of this trail either by bike or by foot. If you are going to be going off the beaten track, consider taking bear spray with you. In fact, more than consider it. You're in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, even if you're a little bit outside Yellowstone. We do rent bear spray. You can see that at YellowstoneBearSprayRentals.com, or just go to ysbearspray.com, ysbearspray.com, and that'll forward you to the site. Always carry bear spray when you're away from a busy area in Yellowstone, and there's an argument to be made that you should carry it with you all the time. While we're talking about mountain biking, there's also a one-way trail, in case I forget to mention it at the end, that runs from Mammoth, which you can hike or walk. It's downhill going to the north, and that's a fun trail to take as well. Anyway, let's get back to the subject of this Yellowstone podcast. We'll be at Gardiner. We're going to come through the north entrance, and we're going to come to the Roosevelt Arch. And the Roosevelt Arch is an arch that was built because it was felt by a guy called Hiram Chittenden years and years ago that this area was a bit desolate, and he thought, why don't we put up a big old arch there? And that makes for a wonderful picture. Unfortunately, it's just outside the gate. So if you're coming from south to north, there may be a big line of cars to get into the park, going from north to south, and you may like to consider leaving your car inside Yellowstone, walking to the arch, and then walking back to your car again, so you don't have to deal with a line of cars getting back into Yellowstone. As you come in to Yellowstone, you'll notice that the Gardiner River is on your left-hand side as you're driving south, or on the east side of the road, and you will see that there are some trees next to the river, and we often see bald eagles in that area, so there are a couple of pullouts that you can take over there. And I'm going to switch to Google Maps. Let's see if we zoom in, if we can see some of these pullouts. Here's the road coming down here. You can see just how close to the road the Gardiner River is. Anyway, take my word for it, there are some pullouts. So there's one over there. It looks like there's one over here as well. Anyway, you'll carry on driving south. Keep your eyes open for wildlife. You'll be amazed just how much wildlife there is in this area. Funnily enough, particularly outside the park. This area over here will have herds of pronghorn and elk and bison and other animals. And then as you come into the park, you're also, with any luck, going to be seeing quite a bit of wildlife, particularly at sunrise and sunset. So we'll continue driving in a southerly direction, and the road does follow the river, and you'll notice that the river and the road cross over each other a couple of times on their way up towards Mammoth Hot Springs. Keep your eyes open in this part of the park for bighorn sheep. Bighorn sheep are to be found in what's known as Yellowstone's northern range, in other words, the mountains towards the north of Yellowstone. And it's not unusual to see them on this stretch of road. In fact, what I've done is I've gone to Google Maps Street View. So this is the view traveling from south to north. Let's just have a look at what's behind us. You've just come through Gardiner Canyon, and you're heading in this direction. You're heading from north to south, and you'll come to a sign that says 45th parallel. Let's take a look at it. You can see it right over here. And that is, theoretically anyway, the halfway point between the equator and the North Pole. I'll say halfway point because the Park Service actually moved the sign from where it used to be a short distance up the road, a short distance to the south, to over here, because there was more parking here, and they were concerned that there were too many cars parking where the 45th parallel actually is, because there's another point of interest there, which I'll show you in a minute. So you can see the Gardiner River in the background. There is a place you can pull out and take a picture, but let's have a look what's on the other side of the road. And we'll see this hill, and if we zoom in a little bit, we'll see it says here, Area Closed Sheep Management Area. Now, those of you who've seen several of my virtual Yellowstone tours and Yellowstone podcasts will have heard me talk about bear management areas, where particularly in the spring, the National Park Service shuts down certain parts of the park because they're concerned about people coming into contact with grizzly bears, particularly those who have just given birth to grizzly cubs. This area has been closed for bighorn sheep management ever since I can remember. But if you turn around now so that you've got your back to the sign that says 45th parallel of latitude and look up at this hill, you've got a decent chance of seeing bighorn sheep. But where you really should be looking is the more inhospitable areas, the areas that are more difficult to get to. And the reason for that is bighorn sheep obviously want to avoid their predators, any animals that may attack them. So you'll find them in really difficult and steep terrain. They're also a little difficult to see because they blend in to the background so well. If we continue up this road a little bit, I had mentioned the 45th parallel. This is where the sign for the 45th parallel used to be, and the Park Service moved it from here. Well, why did they move from here? We're now, by the way, looking north again. Excuse me. We're looking towards the town of Gardiner. This is the Gardiner River flowing under the road. And just on our left over here, this is where you can take a little road to the parking lot for what's called the Boiling River. So the 45th parallel sign used to be over here somewhere. I think it was right over there. And they then moved it down the road to the north because it was too close to the Boiling River. What is the Boiling River? Well, the Boiling River is where the remnants of a hot spring from Mammoth Hot Springs, and Mammoth Hot Springs is around the corner and up the road, it's where the remnants of a hot spring from Mammoth Hot Spring come into the Gardiner River. Here are some pictures I took early one fall a few years ago. And this is the area where the Boiling River is. And it's literally the only place in Yellowstone where people are allowed to go into what's left of a hot spring. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see there's a little area here where you can sit and sort of steps that come down to the river. And this is a great shot. This is what it looks like with people sitting in the river. And this is what you can do. Put on your bathing suit, get into the river. For those of our European friends and our European visitors, there are signs up that says no nudity allowed. Remember, you're not on the beaches in France. And let's take a look at one more picture. This is such an idyllic scene. Unfortunately, at the time that I'm recording this, the area is closed because of COVID, but I do anticipate that it will open up again. So that is where the parking lot for the Boiling River is. If we have a look on our right here, this area has not been closed. And when I've been driving back up from Gardiner towards Mammoth, I've noticed there have been cars parked here and people going swimming in this river. I don't know if it's allowed or not, but and that, of course, is the Gardiner River. As I say, I don't know if it's allowed or not, but the Park Service doesn't seem to have been stopping people. But you may like to take a look at that and find out first if you're allowed to do it before you get in. I neglected to mention that on this stretch of road, you also cross from the state of Montana into the state of Wyoming. Gardiner is in Montana. In fact, 3 of Yellowstone's entrances are in Montana. You've got the north entrance, the northeast entrance where Twitch City and Silvergate are, and of course the west entrance, which is where West Yellowstone is and where you can find us. And talking about us, that's where our motel is. ysmotel.com. That's ysmotel.com if you're looking for somewhere to stay in the Yellowstone area. But if we continue then traveling in a general southerly direction, we'll leave the Boiling River behind us and we're going to start climbing up towards Mammoth Hot Springs. There is a trail here that leads up to an overlook of the Gardiner River. You can take it or leave it. It's not one of the better trails in Yellowstone. As we start climbing up, keep your eyes open for elk. There is an elk herd that is always to be found somewhere in this area, and this is the Mammoth Hot Springs area. So keep your eyes open for elk. Remember that you do need to stay a good distance away from all animals in Yellowstone. You need to stay 25 yards away from all animals except bears and wolves. You need to stay at least 100 yards away from those. And it's such a cool contrast between the elk and the historic old buildings that you'll find here at what is called Fort Yellowstone. Now, remember that we do have what we call virtual Yellowstone tours of all these areas. Here I am driving up from south to north, just gone over the Gardiner River, and then to the left is the Boiling River. And that's that parking lot that you can see. You could also see that it was closed. Remember that we have virtual Yellowstone tours of every single road in Yellowstone without exception. So if you'd like to take a look at what the section of road that you're going to be doing looks like before you actually do it, go to either our YouTube channel or you can go to virtualyellowstonetours.com. That's virtualyellowstonetours.com, and you'll be able to have a look at all the roads in Yellowstone, as well as a whole host of other general Yellowstone topics. You wouldn't believe how many Yellowstone videos and virtual Yellowstone tours and Yellowstone podcasts that we do have. So we're now driving into Mammoth Hot Springs, and this is where this Yellowstone podcast is going to end. Because my voice is a little hoarse at the moment, I won't do my regular sales pitch, but thank you for joining me on another one of these Yellowstone podcasts, and I hope you make it to Yellowstone someday.